Thank you very much again for being with us. We have a really excited crowd here joining us all over Turkey right now, although this seminar is titled ICU's Landscape Architecture's Thursday Seminar. We open the floor to a wider community in Turkey because we like to just inform everybody about what's going on in the world and bringing a reputable name, and we like to share that privilege with everybody. And I really appreciate the fact that you accepted our invitation, and we are looking forward to a really exciting presentation. But before we start, if you allow me, I would like to just give a brief information about you, and I would like to start with that before I give you the share of the presentation. So dear all, thank you very much for coming to our Thursday seminar, which is titled Water and Climate this semester. Today, it's my pleasure to present Jala Makhzoumi as our guest speaker. Jala is an inspirational landscape architect, an intellectual, and a proactive academician. Her academic work and her practice nurture curiosity and inspiration and influence many people around the world. Just a brief information about her background. Jala has an architecture degree from the University of Technology in Baghdad, Iraq. She completed her master's degree in environmental design at Yale and her PhD in landscape architecture at Sheffield University. Currently, Jala is an adjunct professor at the Landscape Architecture Department at the American University of Beirut. She is the co-founder and the president of Lebanese Landscape Association. As far as I know, or I can catch from the internet, Jala is also a founder of 44, a Lebanon-based architecture, landscape architecture, and ecological planning firm. Jala's outstanding achievements have received many recognitions, such as the Tamayus Award in 2013 for Women in Architecture and Construction. It's an excellence award for women who have contributed to the fields of architecture and construction throughout the Near East and North Africa. Then she received A-Class Lifetime Achievement Award in 2019, and the very fresh one, A-Class Sir Jeffrey Jellicoe Award in 2021 for her outstanding contribution to landscape architecture practice and scholarship. Jala has published many articles and books about ensuring resiliency, sustainable use of natural and cultural resources, and promoting balanced human and nature relationships in the Mediterranean ecosystems. Her ecological landscape design and planning, the Mediterranean context, and the Horizon 101 books are key to mention. Jala has dedicated her career to fostering ecological planning and design research and projects. For instance, in her work in Erbil Greenwell, Iraq, she aims to create a people-centered multifunctional landscape that complements sustainable agriculture and natural and cultural heritage conservation. In her research about the island landscape in the Mediterranean, she presents a multifunctional landscape approach, promoting strategies to protect the river corridors, ecological health, and spatial integrity in northern Cyprus. Jala has a candid style to cross her message about ecological planning to other professions. I remember in 2015, she was addressing a ballroom of architects in the South Galata in the Mediterranean Tech Series, and her influential speech has opened the floor for a deeper discussion with Turkish landscape architects. Probably she didn't realize that, but I would like to mention that now. Jala suggests focusing on the landscape process rather than the product. Subsequently, she opposes the market-led beautification projects and generic landscape designs that dilute local and regional differences and transcend the uniqueness of culture and place. In this regard, her collaboration with Dalila Bush, sorry for my pronunciation, it's a small group in Beirut. Their action put the site on the work.
Yeah, Dalia Group.
In her book, which is my favorite, Horizon 101, Jala elaborates how landscapes can stimulate deep meanings and strength in difficult times, such as wars, social, economic, and political crises. That's something that we can all relate. Thus, Jala has a profound way of crossing her messages to society and politicians, an exquisite quality to promote peace and democracy that underpin our profession. And I can go on and on about Jala because
No, please don't. Enough.
and I know that she's a humble person, very much. And I know that
I don't know how I'm going to give this talk after all of this. I hope I live up to expectations.
I'm just, you will meet all the expectations today, Jala, I'm sure.
Inshallah, inshallah.
Thank you very much. Okay, now, Nergis, can you help me with screen sharing?
Yeah, can I share, please?
Yes.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Okay.
The floor is yours now. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let me see. Where is my presentation? Yeah, this one. And what I do is 1 minute. Okay, can you see my screen now? Yes. Okay. Okay, let me just, oh, sorry. Okay, first of all, thank you very much, Hayriye, for inviting me. It is honestly an honor and a pleasure. I remember E2, Istanbul Technical University. When was I there? I think in 2008, a very long time ago. But so I have lovely memories, and of course Istanbul. So it is really a pleasure and an honor to speak. Thank you for inviting me. I will let me go into the talk right away, because again, apologies for mixing up the time. So my focus is going to be on water, because this is the theme for this series. But also, I want to look at vernacular management. As I asked, is it a relic of the past, or are there lessons that we can learn from this? First, I'd like to talk a little bit about basic principles, which I will then look at 2 case studies that I'm going to talk about. My focus is rivers and water courses. And I will talk about first, a rural case study, and then an urban case study. The urban case study you might have seen, but I think it's relevant to the topic. Before we go into that, let's look, first of all, back. It's the wealth of water management practices, vernacular, in our region, in the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean, is incredible because of water scarcity. People have, over time, developed a very wide range of management practices, some of which can be relevant. For example, rainwater harvesting ponds, as you can see in the center left, in southern Lebanon, throughout southern Lebanon, at a time when now we're talking about rainwater harvesting. Water wheels in Iraq, a Roman and later Ottoman water canal system in Sidon, which is the city that I will be talking about. And also the Qanat system in more arid parts. The Mediterranean is an incredible place, the Eastern Mediterranean. The fact that the rainwater is limited to, I mean, there are 7 or more dry months, means for most of the Mediterranean, means that water is really of utmost importance. But at the same time, with this arid and semi-arid region, it is also world biodiversity hotspot. As you can see from the map, the Eastern Mediterranean is part of this. Now, one of the themes that I would like to look at is this man, I excuse the language, but this is Nave, and he, this is a long time ago, but human beings are at the same time effectors and affected. We have now, with COVID and with global warming, we're finally realizing this. So people shape their environment to to create what they need, but they use it sustainably and efficiently. As you can see in this wadi in the western Mount Lebanon, where large parts are used for tobacco cultivation. And these are also much smaller water courses, wider ones that are totally cultivated with grain, but also smaller ones which are colonized by Pistachia lentiscus and by different Mediterranean shrubs in North Cyprus. Another way of capitalizing on resources, soil is also a valuable resource, is through terraces. And terraces can be as small as less than a meter high, or they can be a meter and more high. Again, it is creating land, not managing land. And multifunctional landscapes is a key, with the two systems of Silva Saltus agar, which is a mosaic of forestry, pasture, and agriculture, and Hisa montado, which is really intercropping of olive. And we see this in forests, in mountains, and rivers, and also around cities. Looking ahead, much has changed. I mean, yeah, I'm not trying to be romantic, but I truly believe, as I will try to show towards the end of the lecture, that the principles for management of water resources is a valuable inspiration and lesson for us. Today, we're all aware of the urgency of climatic problem, of global warming, rising seawater. Why? I mean, part of it we know. Part of it is really increased world population, concentrations in cities, intensive use of water, as you can see here, especially North Africa and the Middle East, not so much Turkey. Turkey is quite rich in water resources, and Lebanon. But you can see that by 2025, water withdrawal is far exceeds what is available. Also, the ecological footprint of humans are intensifying, as you can see from the scale above. The only areas which are free are really the Saharas in North Africa and in places in China where there are deserts. So really there is. One of the problems is ignoring ecological continuities. And I love this diagram by Nave, where really there is not only ecological continuities, but landscape contiguities. So really, this is the one lesson of landscape, that landscapes can't be boxed, they can't be confined. They continue from the extreme natural, if there is such a thing remaining in the world, all the way to the most urbanized, the city. And in between is a gradient. Once we accept that these connections and continuities are functional, structural in the hierarchical organization of ecosystems, from the techno-ecosystem of city, urban techno-ecosystem, to the natural bioecosystem, this is really, then we can proceed to manage more sustainably. Another problem, I believe, is arrogance of technology and science. We have, in the 60s, looked very much to these, especially in the global south, because in developing countries, we're trying to have projects that are impressive. The Burj Khalifa Tower in the Emirates, the tallest building, dams, I will be talking about dams, highways, and also channelizing rivers. This is also at a time when in the West, on the left bottom side, you can see that many dams are now being dismantled, destroyed, because of their ecological impact, but also because of their social and economic impact on the local communities that is now being taken into consideration. Another change has happened in the world that when we look ahead. Heritage natural and cultural, has moved from a top-heavy global, where we have international agencies like UNESCO, IUCN, dictating what heritage is, towards a new landscape vision that moves away from universalism towards multiculturalism and diversity, fixed definitions to regionally adapted, evolving definitions. Heritage is evolving. It is constantly being constructed and reconstructed. It's not a fix that you can define. The separation of nature and culture, which you can see in the agencies, IUCN and UNESCO, there is much more integration from outstanding values to everyday life. So you see, this is again a very important change that's happening. This has affected as well, this compartmentalization has affected the fragmented way we deal with environment. I mean, this is a comparison of entities in charge of environment in Arab countries. So you can see sometimes it's Ministry of Regional Planning and Environment. Sometimes it's a Ministry of Sustainable Development and Environment. Sometimes it's Water Resources and Environment. So there is really no consensus. What is worse is when we come to water courses. This is the problem we have in Lebanon, and I'm sure in many other countries. The legislative is under the Ministry of Environment. The financial, funding projects is under Council of Development and Reconstruction, whereas the administrative, the actual management and undertaking project is the Ministry of Energy and Water. And then execution is by the Ministry of Public Works and Municipal. My goodness, how can you coordinate all these bodies? It's impossible. Something fails somewhere and it becomes very difficult to manage resources, especially water resources, efficiently. And Lebanon is one of the richest regions with water resources in the Arab Middle East. Another change has taken place. If you look to the left, 20th century environmental issues were dealt with through, it was state-led global treaties. It's very similar to the diagram I showed a little earlier. It was top-heavy, governments make treaties and action to protect and manage better the environment. It filters down to the people. Design has a minor role. 21st century community action. I use the word Blockadia from Naomi Campbell's book on climate and global warming, where it has changed. People are much more aware of what environment is, how important it is to their livelihoods, to their identity as a heritage. And so people are upholding environmental issues, and they in turn are dictating to national and international agencies, not always, but in many, many cases in the world, in India, in Turkey, in Lebanon, I know. Here, design takes on a much bigger role. The designer, especially the landscape designer, is a facilitator, a mediator, and because they mediate people and the environment and agencies, whether they're funding or state agencies. So this is again another very important. Now I will move to the case studies, the two case studies I'd like to share with you. One of them is about reclaiming rural narratives. Just to begin with, we have to accept that landscape is at once a platform for the expression of power, mainly centralized state power. But as I argue in a book that's going to come out recently on landscape that it is also a platform for action. It is empowering. And this is the case study I'd like to share with you. If you look to the topographic map of Lebanon to the right, you can see very clearly, I mean, Mount Lebanon rises up to 3,000 meters, which is incredible for a small country. And so you have smaller and larger rivers and streams trickling down from the mountains to the Mediterranean. These you can see in the map in the center. And the project, the Bizri Dam, is really the one hatched, and you can see the enlargement to the extreme left. Now, the idea of dams started with the French colonial rule in Lebanon in the 20s, and it was developed further through assistance from the US to develop the project, the idea of dams, to trap water so you can use it. The dams have proved that really they do not work. In most cases, they do not work, large dams. But the thing is that they continue to be implemented in Lebanon up to now. And the Bizri Dam, I mean, these plans were made in the 40s and the 50s, and they're still now being revived. Why? Why? Because of corruption. Because when you commission such a large project, those in authority have a lot to gain from the project. The contrary is true, because if you create small barriers and manage more efficiently the way the local communities have managed for millennia, then you really don't have a problem and you maximize the use of the water. One reason is corruption, but that's not the only reason. The other reason is that because cities are growing, the priority is cities. We want to bring water to Beirut, which holds almost half the population of Lebanon, not even 2/3. So really it is, these are the priorities, and they are wrong priorities. They are not the right priorities. So this project that you can see, the Bizri Dam, I have the website, and is an incredible, it's a river that originates in two promontories in the mountains, comes to this dark area, which is the Bizri reservoir, expected reservoir, then continues all the way to Sidon, which is the second case study I'm going to talk about. They're not related in a way, it's the Awali River. But this dam that is being created is approximately, the reservoir is 570 hectares in area, 150 hectares of agricultural land, 82 hectares of pine forest, prime pine, one of the largest in the Middle East, in the Arab Middle East, 131 orchards, and 77 investigated archaeological sites. So all of this is ruined through the dam and the reservoir, the Bizri Dam. Further problem, the Bizri location of the dam is on a seismic fault, so it's a fault line. So any seismic movement will spell disaster. The waters will flood all the way to the coast. So really there are many fears. It is not justifiable. It is unexplainable, and still it goes on. So let's have a look at a lot of the images I use are from a young landscape architect who graduated from Lebanon, from AUB, and did her master's on Bizri in MIT. Now, this, you can see images of the river, and then you can see above the mainly forests, different trees, and you can see small water collection areas which have worked very well. The valley, the Bizri Valley is an incredibly fertile and cultivated, richly cultivated landscape, as you can see here. And you can see there is olive, fruit trees, citrus, banana. It's a productive landscape and a very, very Of course, productive landscape means that it sustains many livelihoods. Another reason is that because it's one of the widest valleys in Lebanon, it has 2 seasons. So more than 3 planting seasons, not just 2 planting seasons. So early summer, late summer, and winter crops. So really it is also, it's a place for arable cultivation, but also for herding sheep and production of milk, cheeses, and so on. Archaeological sites, it is, I mean, this is an Ottoman bridge, there is a church, there is a Roman temple, remains of a Roman temple, and all of these will be gone. And of course, I needn't say rich biodiversity. There is another problem. Those of you aware of the political, I mean, Lebanon, for a small country, is very, very diverse religiously. And the Bizri River, as you can see, the dashed red line, divides 2 different groups of people. Shuf district is mainly Druze, and the Jizin district to the south is Maronite. So it's Catholic, basically Catholic Christian. So the thing is that the river was really the demarcation of battles between these 2 factions during the Civil War, 75 to 1990. And as you can see later on from the comments of one of the residents, a lot of the Christians left. It's mixed. I mean, it's not like the north of the river is Druze, and no, it's mixed, but predominantly. But today, there is much more of a division. So the valley is where they meet, because economically they meet. They both want this valley because they need the livelihoods. So this becomes a common ground for them. And by creating a reservoir, you ruin that. These are some of the quotations from Legal Agenda, which did an incredibly detailed interviews with the people. One of the people, Ma'moun Abu Sha'ra, says, the people of Jizin and Souf, respectively, south and north of the river, invest in their lands, either directly or by leasing the land to other farmers. The economic returns from the Marj is valley in Arabic. From agriculture, it's, sorry, I can't read, is no less than $6 million for 1 season. More seeing people of the Marj enjoy 2 planting seasons or more. Third. So really it is economically very important. Environmental concerns, for example, Gibran Habib says, our forefathers built their houses on a sand tell following an earthquake that happened 1,000 years ago. The soil is fluid. We lose land when the waters of Bizri rise and continue to construct stone walls to protect our property. So they're very well aware of the geological conditions, and they have managed with them. Again, Abu Shara, he says, changes to the local climate. This is another fear, that with the introduction of the 570 hectare reservoir, changes to the local climate with so many cubic meters, 125 cubic, my village and agricultural land will be affected by the reservoir. If it does not explode from pressure on the fragile rocks of the area, he means of an earthquake caused by building the dam on the fault line, the high humidity from evaporation will destroy our crops, kill the grapes and figs and pomegranates and other trees that can't withstand the humidity. Also very important, pines can't stand the humidity. So really the pine forests will be affected. So people, the local people are much more aware of the disaster effects of the reservoir in the valley that you see. They're even aware of the political disempowerment. Ma'moun Abu Shara says that self-sufficiency liberates citizens. Yes, if I have the money, I don't have to follow the political leaders because I am self-sufficient. Liberates citizens, farmers, and village communities from the servitude to the Zo'ama throughout Lebanon. There was another caption. Unfortunately, I removed it, but it says that this is a place where we meet Christians and Christian Maronites and Druze. And this is a place for reconciliation. If this big reservoir is built, that's it. The Christians will never return here. There will be no reason for them to return. So even political repercussions of this dam are terrible. By the way, I have the website Bisri Dam. There's a lot in there for those of you interested. Look at how the World Bank, I'm sorry, I forgot to say the most important part. The World Bank is funding the project. Without World Bank funding, there would be no project because there's no money. And now definitely, but I'm talking, this is really in 2013, it was revived. So look at how the World Bank portrays Bisri. None of the issues that we just discussed. It says, people are thirsty in Beirut. We will give water to thirsty people in Beirut. This is the romantic vision they put. People are very well aware that these photos of children really are a fallacy. They're not true. Another fear is, if you look at the image, this is another one of these dams. I can't remember which one, Jannah, which is a total failure. They ruin the landscape. They create those walls, and many times it's just not working, or the contractor runs away with the money and it stopped halfway, and you have this incredible scar in the landscape. And the people have lost, the landscape is gone, and nobody has gained. There was a lot of protest starting. There was a young architect urbanist, Nassour, who started the movement and realized we can't be local. He's not from Bisri, but he started the movement, and they went national. It became the national campaign to save Bisri. And you can see the banners carried, the heritage sites, the trees under threat. We don't have water scarcity, we have corruption. People are very much aware of what's happening. So stop building, big dams. But the real impetus for opposition came from the Intifada. I don't know how many of you are aware, but in 2019 in October, there was spontaneous mass protest in Beirut, then all over Lebanon against state corruption. And you can see here, this is from an article I just published, and you can see on the left are waterfront areas that are being privatized by the state and by neoliberal, market forces in collusion with the state. And the Beirut Central District, which was reconstructed according to a neoliberal vision. And you can see in the map, all over Lebanon, people started protesting because they had had enough. Sadly, it was very effective, but sadly, what happened is that with COVID and lockdown became a way to stop the protest, and it ended. And you can see now the state in Lebanon is intolerable. But while the Intifada was going, Bisri benefited. People from all over Lebanon rushed to Bisri, broke the barriers by the contractor, asked that all the equipment and machinery be removed, and they were removed, and liberated the site. A lot was ruined, trees were cut, but still no construction has begun. And eventually, with many petitions and protests to the World Bank stopped the project. They said that we need more studies. And so, in a way, we succeeded. But there is no success, complete success, because the developer is there, they have a lot at stake, and they might come back any day. But what this shows is that people are aware. We should never underestimate local communities and what they think, what they know. And we can work with them as designers to bring forth their cause. I conclude here with this slide by Jude, who looks at protection and rehabilitation of the Bizri Valley, and as a place for reconciliation for both people, and to revive it, to modernize agriculture, but to have the same multifunctional mosaic that existed there, and to use this as a way forward rather than the dam. Because unfortunately, the land has been expropriated by the state. So to take over what was expropriated and develop it as a sustainable agriculture and livelihood models that mirror the vernacular that existed before. The second is really reclaiming urban narratives from Saida River. And again, I like this project very much because it is interdisciplinary, because it is very much participatory, and the idea of bringing people from all around the Mediterranean within this framework and methodology is very valuable. Also important is that it says master plans don't work all that well, because really by the time you prepare all the background material and complete your master plan, things on the ground have changed. So really inside the idea was to develop a strategic framework whereby parts could be funded, parts could be protected. So it is a much more practical eye. This is the team. I've showed this before, and these are the components of the project. So the components are diverse, and the team, you have economists, you have urban infrastructure, you have cultural heritage, Waida leading the project, and you have myself and Selwa as environment and ecology, and we added landscape because landscape was not there. It is very participatory again, so there were people and communities from all over Sidon that came, and they were there. We had town meetings, we had schools, religious institutions, waqf. You have the same, I think, in Turkey, waqf, which is really property of religious institution, Christian and Muslim. So these are also people who have a lot of land that can liberate. I will focus really on water resources and specifically on rivers. But there was an agriculture component, and there was also green open spaces. But in a sense, in the landscape, we collapsed all of them. This is some images from Sidon. You can see, or Saida, you can see images of the town. It's a very old Phoenician town with a sea fort and a land fort. And also, again, like we saw in Bizri, there is a lot of diversity. And you can see in the small left bottom side, we have Sunni village. I mean, Saida or Sidon is yellow, is Sunni predominantly, but you also have Christian villages around, and you have Shia Muslims also, and you have the largest Palestinian camp, the Grey. So you see this diversity. One of the struggles we had is that we insisted in the participatory approach that all of these are included. The municipality wasn't terribly happy about this, but in the end they had to give in. So this is again something really important in the project. Again, a closer look at the topography. You can see once more, there are, they say, 7 hills of Saida, just like the 7 hills of Rome. There are hills, and in between are maybe not rivers. The Awali, the top one, really comes from Bizri. So with Bizri Dam, this river will die because the waters will be diverted to. Now it's a very big river, relatively big. And then at the bottom, there is Saini River. In between are small streams, or what we call seasonal water courses. And because they are seasonal and they dry in the winter, people forget that nature doesn't forget. So the ecological memory is there, and but people choose to ignore them. So this is a view you can see from the agricultural fields towards the hills, and the small dips are really where the rivers come out. And this is a view from the hills towards the coast. If you look to the left, these are, I mean, the top part, the darker gray is Sidon, which is the lighter gray to the right. You can see the rivers and how far they go back, and the water courses that sustains them, the water springs, natural springs that sustain them. So really it is not just an ecological network, it is a cultural network, because there are practices involved with those springs and with these minor, but with rapid urbanization, unregulated, the landscape is changing. If you look to the right side, what do you think this is? It's the sewage network. Look at how they correspond to the river. Where do they put the sewage network? In the rivers. Why? Because the water of the river is state property. It's not owned by anyone. It's there, it's seasonal. We can forget about the water that floods in. And so this is really what we have. And this is disastrous. And it's not just here. This is the story throughout, either channelizing rivers or creating in small water courses the sewage network, so sewage discharge. And of course, this is an image, for example, of one of the rivers. You can see the Amli. You can see the natural flow is in dark blue, and the turquoise is where it has been channeled. It's really not channelized, rather a culvert, so that it's completely covered. And you can see the constructions from the 60s below and how it is today. So this is really the way water courses were treated. So we identified these open, closed channel, encroachment also onto the river, because then it's not important anymore, unregulated waste dumping, and of course, stormwater. This is a very interesting image from Lil Medina. I've put the reference. They did a very interesting, look at the building, the white building in the middle. And you can see from the 60s, and you can see the extent of urbanization. All the fields and lands around and the river course have been completely urbanized. What happens is that the sewage manholes and the access points break, and the sewage and water mix. Sewage is discharged into the sea, and the sea is polluted. In the street that you see in the center top, this is another river, one of those streams, Barghouth, completely covered. It is under the street. And the Amli, as you can see, the discharge. Now, as I said, nature doesn't forget. Nature has a very long memory. As we talk about flooding everywhere, but there's also flooding here. You can see every year in the spring, when the snows melt and there's rainwater and melting snow, you have flooding inside that. It ruins property, it ruins the orchards, and as everything is discharge rich, sediments are discharged into the sea. Also ruined is really the river as it is celebrated in an image from the early 20th century, and as it is today, which is a dump really at Mars Sidon. Now, one of the ideas we did, the concept for the Saida urban sustainable development strategy was to develop the rivers as ecological corridors, but also as amenity corridors, as amenity spaces. So people can enjoy walks, just walk along this, if it's clean. You don't need much, you just need a small path, maybe a cycling path, and that's all, and it doesn't cost much, but first you have to clean it. So one of the strategies, we worked with a water resource engineer. It's not within our specialty. So one of the ideas is that the total annual rainfall ranges between 600 and 700 millimeter. as with most cities, Lebanon suffers the shortage in potable water. So what we did, these problems can be seen as opportunities for future development of sustainable water. What happens if you look at the map, the sewage discharge points in the winter, because sewage and rainwater are mixed, the sewage plant in the bottom next to the last river cannot process them. So they're discharged into the sea. But if you separate stormwater from the sewage and you contain the sewage in a channel, small channel, then you have no problem. You segregate. It's like separation at source with solid waste. It's a very similar concept. So this is really what we proposed. Nadeem Farajallah, who worked on this, chose an area of 14.2 hectares. We had already identified what is built and what is open streets. And the strategy that was proposed is first to gather water from rooftops because there is no contamination. The next step is to gather water from roads and medians after the threat of sewage contamination is eliminated. So we have to really treat at least initial treatment. And you can see the amounts of water that can be stored and used later on in the, so really you are combining ecological health of the river and ecological integrity of the river, restore it. You are creating an amenity feature, but also a geomorphological feature, because really this punctuates urbanization, so you don't have continuous homogeneous urbanization, and you're saving the sea and storing water resources. So it's a very, very important strategy. This is briefly, I've shown this before, the idea of a green-blue network where we have the rivers. We also use the abandoned railway station as a green corridor because it was abandoned, and to protect the agriculture. And you see the strategic objectives for the USUDS: ecological integrity of streams, marine, groundwater, enforce existing the legal system is there, but it's enforcement, and there is no money or authority to enforce. When you combine and multifunction, it is possible then. Increase the quantity and improve quality of green areas, and also to reinforce landscape distinctiveness in Forsyth Dam. This is again an image. If you look only on the top row, water courses, you see that we combine what I just said: environmental health, socioeconomic benefits, landscape heritage, because the rivers are a heritage. They have stories. They mean a lot to the people. Districts were named after them. You can't just forget them. And then we have amenity greenways. A group of young planners and architects picked up this strategy. One thing I have to stop here and say, the Med Cities urban sustainable development strategies is not binding. So the municipality, who was the client, and we participated with them the whole time, are not obliged to implement it. They can choose not to implement it, or implement parts of it, or use it to get more funding, which they do. But they can't really, there are many things they don't want to do. They don't want to convert the water courses, separate sewage. It's just too much work and too much money. Why would they do it if they're not forced to? But because the project was participatory and because it engaged so many people, there was rising awareness of what these rivers are and their memory. And Lil Medina in Arabic means for the city. And their motto is Sidon, so we live better. They picked up the story of the rivers and they took one stream, the Amli River, and they worked with this river. They looked also at the agriculture, and they raised awareness. They had many meetings. They did an extensive research with a lot of community meetings to explain the importance of the river. And I will show some of the images they have prepared through this publication, which says, للمدينة أملي River in Greater Saida. And note, Greater Saida. Remember that diagram I showed with the Shiite peripheries, Sunni, Palestinian. Greater Saida, the rivers are a means for collaboration. If you don't collaborate, there's no way you can manage a river. It goes across boundaries. So this was the mission that we spoke of, that Lil Medina picked up. Our project ended and we each went our way, but Lil Medina are inside them and they continued. So this is some of the images that they did. The top image with the girl with her hand up is the spring of Majd al-Youn, one of the sources of the river, and stories related to that. In another is, again, another spring that goes further up north. It talks about local practices of gathering wild herbs that they use in culinary practices. They talked about stories, and in this small sketch and map to the extreme right, they list everything. Water mills on the river, bridges that were there, bustan or orchards, famous orchards people recognize. So it's really it's a cultural map of the Amli, which is, without reviving the river, it will be senseless. Again, they looked at, if you can look at the simple sketch, and I love their sketches because they're like as if a child has drawn them. They're not like Photoshop render. They're very, very simple and people can relate to them. So you can see they are using the river, and I've had many students really work on rivers since, to put all the sewage in a channel and to free the channel for rainwater, for vegetation, even if there's no water. There is the course, and this way you revive the memory of the river. I will conclude with another study. This is academic, and this was by Selwa, who was with me on the project. We worked together in the USPS. For her master's degree in urban design, she applied an ecological landscape design approach to see whether she can integrate ecological features like streams into the current planning tools that we have in Lebanon, which really treat the site as a tabula rasa. All they do is that they see that there is land and there is zoning and there is 25% for roads and for open spaces. Whether it's in a mountain terrain or a coast or a river, it doesn't really matter. So it's terribly crude and insensitive to the landscape. So Selwa looked at how to integrate, and you can see the river zones. She has created barriers and justified them through the planning system of how to protect these. This is part of her work, which can be accessed on the AUP library. So this concludes my talk. I would like to have this, just to summarize. We started by saying vernacular is of significance. So vernacular priorities then, really ecological continuities. There were no barriers. They looked at the resources as interconnected, really as ecosystems. They did not call them ecosystems, but they treated them and managed them as such. Their use was efficient, sustainable, as we saw in the Bisri example. And community was a priority. People come before everything else. And if we look to landscape architecture now, these are the lessons we can learn. Ecological continuities, networking, think beyond borders and boundaries. Think beyond municipal edges, like Lil Medina did. They moved way beyond municipal Saida. multifunction. I think that is the key. Also because it is sustainable to multifunction. I mean, in Lebanon, there are neither the resources nor the manpower to manage such projects. But when you combine environmental mitigation measures with greening, with water resource management, yeah, there is a bigger chance you'll get funding and you can have the project. Otherwise, nothing will happen. It will remain as a PowerPoint presentation. And community overall participatory design is the key. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jala. Very similar problem, similar issues, and it all tells us that we need to connect with social phenomena and we need to translate them into the design and planning in our neck of the world. And it takes a lot of dedication, creativity, and relentless effort. So we shouldn't give up or we shouldn't feel discouraged. Okay, thank you very much again. And now I would like to receive the questions.
Yeah, of course. Just want to enlarge the screen and I want to stop sharing. Okay.
You can either write to the chat box or directly.
Let me just, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm ready.
While our audience is preparing their questions, if there is any.
Okay, let me stop sharing.
I would like to make a comment of the situation in Turkey. You showed the map like older times and much recent, relatively recent times, Jala. And like last 2 years, we have a really severe implications of the climate change that we are feeling seriously. And the water resources are becoming less and less. And we have to utilize our river corridors in a more sustainable way. And just like the example you showed us, our rivers, and you already know the Turkish context, are covered with concrete. And they have no connection with the community and they are surrounding landscape, urban landscapes. The only function they are assigned is to just drain the rainwater as fast as possible from the city, which is against the rule of the nature again, and that water should be mingling with the city and they're doing it with the city. So I'm really looking forward to those days and the last 3-4 years and today even the municipality is putting an emphasis on gaining back those river corridors in Istanbul, and I'm sure that in Anatolia there are other municipalities kind of like addressing the issue, but we are really looking forward to the concrete examples, the physical functioning good examples. So, dear colleagues, do you have any questions for Jala? And if you do not have, I will have one. How does it feel?
Can I ask a question?
Before, let's just.
Okay.
Let's just do a really quick break, and I will ask you, well, how does it feel to receive the ECLAS and IFLA, all these lifetime achievements? How did you do that, Jala?
I don't know. I think they made a mistake.
And how does it feel? And what's next now?
I don't know. I am really happy. I mean, the IFLA especially. I mean, ECLAS as well. But IFLA was very important because the profession is so misunderstood in the Arab Middle East. I mean, there are really a handful of landscape architects, and the perception of landscape architecture is so limited to mainly urban beautification, which it is not. You know, you all know, because you know it is so much more than that. I mean, it is a way to address social injustice, to political issues, it is ecological and environmental problems. So really, it's so much more. And this is really for me a platform to talk about the profession and to advertise what landscape architecture is. So in that sense, really, it is so important, and it's incredible. Another problem, I just wrote a chapter for a book it's about landscape education by Dietrich Brunn. In Turkey, it's incredible. You started a long time ago in the 60s. I remember in 2006 when I went to Ankara at Bilkent, there was a conference I just went. I was not invited. I didn't know anyone. And it's incredible. Catherine Moore was there. She was then president of IFLA. And she said, you have more schools of landscape architecture in Turkey than we have in England. So this is incredible. This is something you should be so proud of. It doesn't matter. Even if there are misperception of the profession, or even if it is taught differently, sometimes by schools of agriculture, sometimes schools of architecture, it doesn't matter. Landscape can bridge these. So it's wonderful. In Iran too, there is a lot. Again, they started early. Unfortunately, we're still fighting in the Arab world. Nothing happened. There's so many wars, so much political strife, so that landscape has lagged behind. Now it's picking up. We established the Lebanese Landscape Association in 2016. We helped the Jordanians establish. I'm working with Iraqis. I'm half Iraqi, to establish theirs. So we're trying as much as we can, but this is going to take a long time. And because the political situation is so bad, it's just very, very difficult. So this, going back to your question, I don't know. You saw, some of you who saw for the award, when I started, I loved landscape, and I wanted to study it much earlier, but I couldn't. The opportunities wouldn't allow me. And so I just went into it. And I realized very early on, I have to combine practice, research, and teaching. I can't leave any one of them. So this was also very important for IFLA, because previously IFLA awards, Sir Geoffrey Jellicoe, were given for people in practice, but it's not enough. Everything is changing. The professions, research is becoming integral to a lot of professions that it wasn't before. In the 60s, really, it didn't matter whether there was research. Now it does matter. So research is really your platform where you can stand, talk about what you want to do, what landscape is, what went wrong, where, what project, what case study. And practice, of course, is the inspiration. And teaching is the future generation that will carry the torch. So I think this is one of the reasons why I received that award. And plus that there is really so little done in our part of the world. And it is a good post. So I'm happy. But I think you are in such a good place in Turkey. You have such clever young landscape architects that are doing amazing work. I follow sometimes. And so really, you have also Turkey. It's not a country. Asia Minor, it's a mini continent. So really, you have such diversity from Laz in the north, from the Mediterranean coast, from the Anatolian plateau to Istanbul and the Mediterranean and European side. So again, you have this diversity that you need landscape architects to celebrate, to build on this distinctiveness rather than erode it.
Well, thank you very much for encouraging words. And we have Ebru Hoca raising hand.
Yes. Thank you very much, Jala, for this really useful presentation. It was really nice. So I appreciate your works and thank you very much again. So actually my question is about your works. So have you achieved to integrate the local narratives to your design process actually? How do you use that kind of intangible information in your design process? I'm really wondering that.
Okay. when I have a chance and the luxury, I have, for example, in a project I had for an ecological forest, which I designed in southern Lebanon, I went back and carried, it was a landscape, it was a master plan, but I went back to the village and did semi-structured interviews, qualitative research really, with the residents to understand what was their conception of landscape. I did not use the word landscape. I did the research without using the landscape, because landscape is misleading. When you say landscape, they think a plaza or a public park, and that I didn't want them to think that. So I used components of the landscape and this is published in the International Journal of Heritage Studies. So that is one way of doing it. So this way, I could share with them their own view. Of course they have. If there is no word for landscape, it doesn't mean there is no conception. There is, but we have to find how to find it. In Sidon, as you saw, it's Lil Medina that started the narrative. They followed on our work. In Bisri, Legal Agenda did extensive research, interviews with people. I use that in this last chapter where I talk about landscape as empowerment. So you see, there are different ways of going about this, but also by talking to municipalities, discussing with them, to looking to local communities. Local communities and stakeholders could be anyone. They could be local scientists. In a project in Iraq, in Erbil, we did post-conflict landscapes in rural region. And what we used citizen sciences, scientists to do the work. Because of COVID, we couldn't go there. So it's wonderful. The group we trained not only interviewed the villages and gathered the information, the historical narrative, but in addition, they are from Erbil, and it's so much better than me going there and gathering the information. So it achieved many, again, multifunction. First of all, local young scholars became involved in rural heritage. They are from Erbil and they've never even visited the rural peripheries. That's also another thing we have a problem. There's so much focus on cities. Second, they developed this new technique of how do you work as a citizen scientist? What is the methodology? And because we couldn't go, COVID lockdown continued, we continued to train them to analyze the material, and it was presented. I think there is a website. It's an Hayriye project, funded project. So you see, it varies. The important thing is to prioritize local cultural history and local participants, no matter what they are. And also, I don't mean anyone in general, but there is sometimes an arrogance in professionals that we know best. I mean, governments were like this in the 60s, we know best, we give. No, it's not true. You discuss with people, they also know. And if they don't know, you argue with them, you discuss with them, you debate. So this is also, you have to take a stance of, really, I have learned so much from people, communities that I have worked with. A lot, they have inspired me, and I think they can continue to inspire people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jala. We have another question, and it's about political landscape, the political climate. And our colleague from Malatya, is asking, how is the relationship between landscape, water, and human rights? How do you evaluate that trilogy?
Yeah. The thing is, going back to, I think she must be referring to the book, The Right to Landscape and Human Rights. Look, democracy, human rights. These are very abstract concepts. Unless you pin them down to a place, to a space, to a landscape, and landscape specifically because it has meaning, it has depth. it means nothing. So water, in a sense, we're talking human rights. You saw in Sidon how the different factions of community that were marginalized through a water strategy that is integrative, that looks at the ecological network, looks also at the social network and social meanings. So in that sense, water, because it's a valuable resource and because we all need it, can become a source for addressing issues of right and for also mediating conflict. I won't say overcoming, it's difficult to overcome, but mediating conflict. You saw in the Bizri Valley, the Maronites and the Druze, they fought really terribly. And now the expropriated valley could be a place of reconciliation. Again, it's water and it's politics and it's rights. So really, I think landscape is incredible. It brings all of these together and it addresses the issue of right. The latest chapter I referred to in Tim Waterman's book, Landscape Citizenships. He calls it citizenships with an S because it's not just one citizen. There are many citizens in a different interpretations of what citizenship is. And I used the landscape of the public realm in cities and how it is empowering, really. Because again, citizenship, okay, citizen, I'm a citizen. How do I practice my citizenship? I mean, I can't go to the parliament to vote. So the way I can practice it is through the streets and public spaces in a city. And so Gezi Park is one example. So really, this is how, again, it's rights and it is landscape that makes rights, it's the platform for rights to be enacted. Citizenships have to be enacted. It's no use telling me I'm a citizen if I cannot practice as a citizen. And public landscapes allow that. So that is a part. And there are many interesting articles in that volume. There's also by Tim Waterman and Ed Wall, Landscape Agency. Landscape has agency and it's really very powerful. So it depends how you use it. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, landscape is a medium for citizenship, definitely. It's already passing the 3:30 and
yes.
And there are in the chat box, there are thank you messages for you, Jala, and again, I really appreciate your time, and it was kind of surprising to see that Jude was your protege. Jude Makhzoumi, she was here a month ago with Rafi
Really?
from MIT. She's working with them now. In MIT, we had a workshop, and the beginning of our Thursday seminar has started with Rafi Segal, and then we had Gareth Doherty 2 weeks ago, and now we have you, and then next will be Ludovic Ballion, and then we will be connecting with Matthew Bradbury from New Zealand. So it's a nice series, and you definitely made a wonderful contribution explaining the situation, which is really relevant to our landscapes.
Thank you. I hope it was of use, and thank you very much, Hayriye, for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to revisit really Turkey and all the Turkish culture that came to me from my mom. So really, I miss that. So thank you, and all the best luck to all of you. And thank you, Hayriye, for arranging such amazing speakers for young landscape architects in Turkey. Thank you.
We will be in touch. Everybody take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us.